accessible, affordable, convenient, reliable, and safe transportation to their local destination of their choice, without regard for their disability, their age, or their economic status. And so that's why our groups combine. In a run I was describing to Senator Pachowski, the staff person was asking me, well, how do you describe these five? And I said, we are everything in between the road construction end of DOT and the fixed route bus end of DOT. We're kind of fill in the middle there of the programs that you supervise and work on. So we are very happy with this. And I just want to personally express, and you'll hear later in the 4:30 hour, our official and public thanks for the work that you have done on a couple of important matters. And we're going to recognize and say thank you to people at the end of the session. Our focus in this session, of course, as I said, is kind of restating our beliefs and then working with the department. And we'll start with Diana giving us some background and however the three of you want to play this. But obviously the pieces of the governor's budget that you know are out there in Senate Bill 111. The papers, just so everybody on the call knows that there will be developed papers about all of these programs by the Fiscal Bureau, and more details will be coming. There will be public hearings and office briefings that you will be invited to help us on. So the 50 people that will be joining in here as we go along, you're going to be asked to do more in the months ahead, but we're off to a very good start. So with that, I will turn it over to Diana Moss, who can start off welcoming us and talking to us a little bit about policy.
Hi, nice to be here. Nice to see some familiar faces. Wisconsin DOT is always grateful for our partners in public and private transit. We so appreciate what you guys are doing. So as Gary had mentioned, I'm Diana Moss. I'm the legislative liaison for Wisconsin DOT. And so I work in the secretary's office and work as the first point of contact for all of our state legislators on anything transportation related. We know that more than 1.2 million Wisconsinites either cannot or choose not to drive. That's from people with disabilities to folks who are aging to those who just can't afford a car. And so for those people, everyday activities like going to work, buying groceries, visiting the doctor can take enormous effort. And that's why the work that you guys all do is so important and often serves as a lifeline to many Wisconsin citizens. You know, Secretary Designee Craig Thompson, who will be here at the 4:30 hour, he knows that improving transportation for our non-drivers creates better social, economic, and health outcomes for our entire communities. You know, you guys know these are unprecedented times. We've been operating through a pandemic for almost a year now. It's, you know, a couple weeks shy of a year, and that still blows my mind. And so transit systems, you guys know, have been hit with extra challenges during the pandemic. You know, Wisconsin's tried to help where we can. WisDOT has facilitated the allocation of over $205 million federal coronavirus aid, relief, and economic security, the CARES Act funding to urban and rural transit systems throughout the state. We've also directly administered and reimbursed or are reimbursing over $54 million of CARES funding for rural public transit and intercity bus transportation activities. Also, during the pandemic, we launched our Wisconsin Non-Driver Advisory Committee. We call it WINDAC, and we are using that committee to identify public policy change and development recommendations, along with WisDOT, to improve transportation for all of our non-drivers. In June 2020, WINDAC met for the first time, and WINDAC is comprised of several of you, advocates from various non-driver groups, elderly, low-income individuals, people with disabilities, advocates for non-driver modes of transportation. That includes our transit, bike ped, paratransit, officials from local and state government. Representative Considine is a member of WINDAC, and experts from industry and academia. And so this, the agency is really excited that we can convene this type of committee and the work that we're doing there. The committee met the second time in November, and several of their policy recommendations are actually reflected in the governor's proposed budget. That includes increased funding for transit, a bus replacement fund, provisions that make it easier for transit systems to operate outside of our county or municipal boundaries, increased funding for WETAP, eminent domain for bike and pedestrian facilities is in the proposed budget, and complete streets. So a lot of great work in the transit sector. We're excited about that. There's always more to do, and I appreciate all of the challenges and strengths that you guys have risen and worked through, and through this pandemic. It's a situation that I think still surprises us today, but we're persevering. So with that, I want to introduce, I've got Arun Rao and Ian Ritz here on the phone with me, and so they can talk about their sections a little bit, and then we're here for questions. Arun, why don't you start first?
Thank you, Diana. And I'll start by giving a little update on our state-supported intercity passenger rail route, the Milwaukee-Chicago-Hiawatha service. As probably many of you know, we are operating at 3 round trips now, down from the typical 7 round trips due to COVID. But we are slated to, we're planning on resuming 7 round trips in the spring. At that same time, we would resume the connecting Interstate 41, Green Bay, Fox Cities, Milwaukee throughway, Amtrak throughway service up to its full schedule to connect with those trains. And also around that time, you'll see new modern state-of-the-art coach car equipment coming onto the Hiawatha service, coming online late spring, thanks to the delivery of those cars and completion of that procurement through Illinois DOT. We do anticipate demand returning on the busy I-94 corridor between Milwaukee and Chicago, and on the Hiawatha service. The ridership is already starting. We're starting to show signs of returning during the severe weather we had last week. We saw a significant increase in ridership. So we're starting to see a little more travel. And we are also progressing with planning and projects to advance the increase in daily round trips on that route to 10 round trips daily. We have 4 federally funded projects. We competed for 4 grants. We were successful in all 4 of those, and those are underway and are continuing railroad negotiations to finalize the additional infrastructure needed in Illinois to get to the 10 round trips. And again, those 4 projects are additional equipment for the Hiawatha, the Milwaukee Airport Rail Station expansion with the 2nd platform, Muskego Yard bypass for freight of Milwaukee Intermodal Station, and signaling upgrades near Milwaukee Intermodal Station. The other thing we have going on is the Twin Cities Milwaukee-Chicago second daily round trip train service through the state. And this is really part of the effort, similar to the Hiawatha, to maintain and improve existing services and corridors in the state, to leverage what we have to get some better intercity service. So WisDOT's partnering with Minnesota DOT, La Crosse County, Wisconsin, Ramsey County, Minnesota, FRA and Amtrak to advance that service, which doubles the daily round trips, but quadruples schedule options for communities in Wisconsin along that route. And so we were selected for an FRA grant of $31.8 million to go towards the railroad infrastructure improvements needed to implement those additional trains on that corridor. And one of those improvements is in Wisconsin. It is in La Crosse. That's a $12 million improvement. We also received a federal grant to offset operating support needed for the first 3 years of service to help with the startup period for the new round trip, which was very significant. It really reduces the burden on the states of that during that critical startup period. We do recognize that what this additional service would mean for communities, and want to acknowledge the very strong and overwhelming support from across the state, from chambers of commerce, municipalities like Columbus, Portage, Wisconsin Dells, Toma, and the La Crosse areas, as well as the Eau Claire region, because of the benefits of the additional service at Toma and connections there. I will stop there. Should we go straight to Ian?
Why don't we go to Ian and then we'll take questions all together.
Sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can hear and see me all right. My name is Ian Ritz. I'm the chief of the transit section at WisDOT. I appreciate the opportunity, the invitation from these groups to see and speak with you. It's always great to get, virtual FaceTime with everyone, and so I appreciate the opportunity. I'll touch on a few of the budget items that were proposed in the governor's budget. Diana kind of set the table nicely for me, but there are several program increases that we saw, which we're very pleased about. Now, we all know we're sort of at the, kind of the beginning, middle of the budget process, but nonetheless, it's really important and very pleasing to see these initiatives, in the governor's budget. So, across a couple programs, what we see is actually a 2.5% increase from the base amount. And this is applicable to our 8520 operating assistance program for public transit. And it's actually across all tiers. So your large urban, small urban, and rural. So a 2.5% increase there. We do see a 2.5% increase to our paratransit aids program, which helps to supplement and support ADA paratransit services across the state. There are a couple other, programs that see modest increases, and then I'll touch on two others that have a little bit bigger increase. So the 2.5% also applies to our one of our specialized aid programs. It's our state statute 8522. In the last budget, we saw a fairly significant 10% increase to our 8521 specialized transit aid program that goes to counties. And in this budget, we wanted to try to push for an increase in our, kind of our partner specialized aid program. And we actually use these dollars in combination with federal aid program to provide capital and operating support to nonprofits, as well as public bodies throughout the state. So we're very pleased to see that increase there. And then there's also an increase to our tribal transportation program. This one has a little bit of a tweak to it, whereas in the past, this program was wholly funded out of gaming revenues. The proposal is to actually have an increase to this program, but it shows up in our transportation budget. So just a little bit of a little bit different wrinkle to that program, but nonetheless, we're very pleased that the proposal for an increase to that tribal transit program. Now, the two programs I want to touch on a little bit more specifically actually relate to the creation of a new $10 million annual public transit capital program. And this would be for, basically bus and bus facility types of projects. So replacing vehicles, doing facility improvements, a new construction potentially, or renovations to an existing facility, but then also equipment. So, any variety of transit equipment for maintenance or communications or other, various technologies, those types of things. So right now, Wisconsin does not have a state capital program for public transit. So this, would be, a significant increase to address needs that we know are out there. So that was very pleasing to see that in there. And the other program that I'll touch on a little more specifically is our WeTap program. So this program targets transportation services for low-income individuals. Right now we do have about $2 million that we cobbled together with state and federal resources to put into this. But we're looking to increase that. We know that there is significant demand and often barriers for individuals to gain employment and retain employment, in different parts of the state. So we're trying to do something in that area to expand and enhance those opportunities. So, those are the main funding increases. There were also some tweaks to the VW settlement dollars, that there's still some remaining dollars that have been unallocated. So it's trying to do something there, and then provide a little more flexibility in terms of how transit service may be delivered across municipal borders. This is something we've heard a lot over the years from different individuals, different organizations, and Diana mentioned WNDAC, the non-driver advisory committee. This is something that I've participated in that. I know directly, it's come up in conversation there. So again, it's an opportunity for us to try to be a little bit more flexible and innovative, and try to break down some of those barriers that exist for transit services. So I'll pause there.
Let's open it up. Mark, if you see anybody in chat or any questions for our colleagues here from DOT, obviously, we will be active players. So Steve Arnold, or go ahead.
Yeah, this is for Arun. Do you have a date in mind, or a date range when you say spring or late spring? The cars, you said late spring, and the resuming of the previous frequency, you said spring. And I was just trying to see if I could learn a little bit more about what you had in mind.
See that being around the same time, within a few weeks of each other, potentially. And yeah, that would be sort of a May, June timeframe. We're still working out the exact dates with Amtrak, but hopefully we'll get an update soon on that. Amtrak does need a big lead time to mobilize, and redeploy for the 7 round trip service.
Yeah, I was hoping for March 21st, but I understand. Thank you.
I think you've got a couple of questions there, Mark.
So I can address, this is Ian, I can just jump in and address that first question. So the question, I think, from Bobby is, will there be an increase to the 5310 program? So that specific program, 5310, is actually a federal program. So, we don't, unfortunately, we don't have an ability to really control that at the Wisconsin state level. But what I will say is the state 8522 program that is proposed to have a 2.5% increase is actually, more or less, let's say when we make funding awards through 5310, we actually also utilize the 8522. So they're effectively combined and allocated at the same time. So, ultimately an increase to that 8522 program represents an increase to, to the 5310 programs for the same types of services and projects.
Great. And one of the things, Ian, was I had a call in trying to locate the 8521 funding in the state budget, and nobody could find a reference to it. So I am assuming that 8521 stays at the level that it was last year, because it's not mentioned in the budget. Any advice for us on it? Several people on this call, many people on this call use that program or are familiar with it.
Yeah, I think it's also a safe assumption to assume it's, it's base from
right.
the existing budget. And, what I'll do, I'll just do a little bit of follow-up digging on that and see if there is any change. I don't believe so, nothing I've seen, but I'll pass that along to you. And then my little coworkers coming into the picture.
Quite all right. That's admirable. Admirable. They grow up pretty fast, right? We have a question for Ron from Chris Ott. I don't know if you saw that there.
Yes. Yeah, the question is, what opportunities and potentially greater funding do you see coming from the Biden administration, and what does Wisconsin need to do to prepare for that? Yeah, there are several potential funding opportunities for passenger rail and transit coming from this administration coming up. We have the FY22 appropriations, infrastructure bill / stimulus, and then of course there's the COVID relief bill. I don't have the exact name for that, going through the 1.9 trillion, which does have funding for Amtrak, including for restoring daily long distance service, which is important to Wisconsin for the Empire Builder, and as well as reauthorization going through this year. So there's a lot going on, and a lot of potential passenger rail funding opportunities and programs, and we are preparing for that. In that we are trying to ready the Hiawatha line for additional funding to get those 10 round trips done.
Right.
Yep.
And Ron, do you see the question from Andy Hauk right above what Chris Ott just sent in? Upon reinstituting Hiawatha service, that question? Yeah,
we're still, so I believe that Amtrak would go back to the setup that they had just before we went to a reduced 4 round trip service in last March. But we are trying to get a better idea from Amtrak as well, how that's all going to play out here as they mobilize and prepare for getting back to the 7 round trips.
So in terms of the transit across the tiers and the paratransit, there is a separate appropriation. So many of the vendors on this call may have participated in contracts with the county. Does anybody want to comment on that? Mark Jones, do you see this? So basically there will be some additional paratransit funds, additional $8522 that will be allocated through local and state organizations. Is that right? So what we're seeing there is and is that 2.5% per year? So it's 2.5 with the 2.5 added after that?
Yes, that's right. 2.5 each year. Mm-hmm.
All right. Across all tiers? Yeah,
Yes.
A, B, and C. Okay. And of course, for the people on this call, like people like Paul Woodward from Running, or Carl, or Mark, or any of the shared ride providers that were or are in that business, the pressure on Tier C continues to grow because there are more communities that are looking for the service or have been added to the tier, and the funding hasn't been able to increase. I would suspect, Diana, there may be some people, maybe from both caucuses, that may raise that issue, and we are supportive of having an increase in that. I think every organization on this call. So when Walworth County itself was added as an entire county to Tier C, it took money out of the rest. So the percentage of support from the state, and Paul or Carl, you can comment, or Mark can comment on this, it went down. So the pie did not grow. It's just that the slices got smaller around, and that is the fastest growing area of transit that I can see in the state right now. So that is.
Yeah, anything we can do to just help highlight for the legislature with if DOT can help us. We're trying to put information together regarding the state and federal funding over, so it was about 65, 60, or between 65 and 67% for many years. And then it's been dropping down consistently for the last few years. So we've had a double situation with the local communities. So they've had to absorb that 10 to 12% cut in that manner. But at the same time, and I know Eon has this information with the cost of services that you put together on an annual basis, the hourly cost of delivery of services and the capital cost of the equipment has increased anywhere between 2 and 4% each year. So really, it's a double whammy for these local communities that have income caps, tax levy caps, in trying to be able to increase funds. And in calendar year 2020, the city, my local community here locally, the only way they maintained service with the increase in cost and the decrease in local and state and federal share is they deferred the cost of purchasing and replacing one of their municipal squad cars. Well, that's not a sustainable budgeting method for any local community. And I know the other communities that we work with, and I know Paul works with a lot of these, they're all having the same situations. The demand for rides is increasing. The number of ride denials is increasing. People who want to access the service, but the services are full. And these small rural communities are just absolutely dependent on these services, but without a means of generating revenue or something to help stop the gap, they're really, in a bad position. So if we could just, through your department, highlight the two factors, which is, over the historic period of time of, since, 2020, since 2000 to 2021, what was the state and federal share, and what was the average cost per hour for these communities? Because I think you're going to see that, that's where the big increases come, is just the cost of service has also gone up, in delivery of service. So any help you can provide us with that, and then, we're hoping to work with the legislature to try to find a means to help fill that gap a little bit on both sides, because you obviously can't give away money you don't have, and so we need to find ways to be able to help our legislature be able to identify that need.
Mark, I appreciate those comments, and some of that information, or some of the information we have, I would say, fairly readily. Those are some of those trends we've been monitoring for a number of years now, and some of it we might have to do a little bit of work to kind of pull some stuff together. But yeah, I mean, we recognize that demand and cost for service has gone up across the industry, and what we have seen in the rural part of the state, tier C, is there's been a growth in services at the kind of like the municipal shared ride taxi level, but then also in your county and multi-county regional type of services as well. And
there's been huge program increases, as you well know. So some in the last 5 years, have really grown substantially. So, and I know Jerry Petrowski, the last time we met with him, clearly said, bring me some information so that I can look at that, and then I have something to go off of. I mean, he's he knows he needs to think out of the box of what we can do, but anything that we can give him that information and say, hey, this is the service that this funding is providing. But it needs a little bit of a life.
Yeah. And Ian, to Mark's point, and especially for Diana as the legislative liaison, I think there are 4 state senators who are close to supporting a proposal, and obviously Jerry Petrowski joined us at 1 o'clock. Is Senator Teston from Stevens Point, has that area, Senator Bernier from Eau Claire, and then probably one of the most outspoken of them is Senator Janet Bewley, whose district is bigger than Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut put together, as I've often said, is that as these populations age or even change, the demand for service goes up. Otherwise, there's greater isolation. And so we're going to be addressing that. And before you all got on the call, I was talking to Diana a little bit about the issue with the nursing homes and the reimbursement rates being so low. So we may be bringing things to you for the department's review and for understanding. We also will be working with Zach Madden, the governor's lobbyist, on these matters and bringing them forward as well, because there are gaps in that. And certainly there isn't been the resource put into it that we need to see go there. There is another transit issue that I had a question on it, and of course, transit aids. And this probably is in Diana's court, but Ian certainly can respond. The governor's budget creates an exclusion to county and municipal levy limits that would allow a municipality, and it could be any municipality as far as I know, to fund transit routes that cross boundaries if a referendum approving the agreement has been passed. And so that is in the budget. There are communities that have shared rides where the Walmart is located 4 miles outside of the community or 3 miles or whatever it is. And how do you connect services? Or the Walmart is in the next community, which doesn't have a shared ride. So how do you anticipate this working? Has the secretary, who in the department advises you on this matter with regard to sort of a mini RTA or mini RTA kind of an effort?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't have any special insight on this particular item. So we can discuss it further and try to follow up on you. So I'm sorry, I just
no, I'm aware of the provision. Right, yeah, I'm aware of it, but it's not, I don't know that provision with the local referendum piece came from us. And so we would have to dig a little bit more into it and see, we're gonna have to see what even the legislature thinks about it here really quickly.
Right. Well, governors in the past have been known to add their own policy to the budget. So I think of the 5 organizations that are on the call, all of us have supported the concept of coordination, whether it be an RTA or any kind of coordination, because we know that the boundaries in Neenah, Menasha, Appleton, you add the town of Buchanan, you've got 3 counties, you've got 11 municipalities, the whole Valley Transit issue, you've got the emerging growth of the Eau Claire to Minneapolis markets, all of these issues. So we are, as entities, big supporters of coordination efforts. And for any system, so a shared ride makes a contract with a municipality. If this can help expand the service that's provided, connecting people in adjoining townships or in adjoining municipalities, that would be a good thing. So we think this is a missing objective and are pretty supportive of it. You can please pass that on to the secretary. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that. So Holly has a question. This is WETAP funding. Holly, do you want to ask your question and let them respond?
My question is, with the WETAP funding, many of us in the mobility management world are using that funding to work in our rural communities to help people get to work. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to some more details about what they're looking at doing. I know you said something about allowing for crossing county lines, but am I understanding right that presently public transit does not have access to WETAP, or do they, or will they ever?
Yeah, so the way we implement WETAP now is it is limited to nonprofit organizations, and we support, a few different types of projects. Mobility management is a main one. but then some operations, like van pools and other vehicle loan programs, those types of things. So we kind of have this variety of services. Yeah, variety of services. And we're looking to expand the program while not necessarily, certainly not trying to harm existing participants. And WeTap, it's there's all kinds of really neat, innovative types of projects that that are currently supported through that program. We want to try to maintain those, but we know that there are more employment transportation needs out there, and so it's looking to sort of build off of what we have in place already, and and maybe that is expanding to public transit systems potentially, but like I said, not trying to undermine sort of the existing good work that's out there and among the WeTap community. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, because I'm thinking like, I serve the Fox Cities in those counties around there, and this 41 project that they're working on. That's why the question, because it seems to me that helping provide those connections of that bus going up and down 41 would be. But I'm scared because I don't want to take away from all of us that are doing good work in the rural communities too.
Yeah, I mean that's the dilemma, or that's like a scenario that we're trying to work with is recognizing that there are more needs, more ideas, more services out there potentially, while not like I said, eliminating certainly the existing projects. So it's just we're looking to grow and enhance rather than cut and eliminate. So, yeah.
I appreciate you recognize that.
Yeah.
Diana, there was, in our last discussion, we ended up talking about electric vehicles, and a lot of the organizations certainly are considering this. I won't give Carl the podium completely, but one of the things in the governor's budget that relates to transportation was an allocation of $10 million of the Volkswagen money, and Ian briefly mentioned this. This is a big lawsuit settlement out of California dealing with emissions settlements. And are those funds to be dedicated to charging stations in a grant program? And it looks like they'll be administered by DOA. But what do you know about that? And will the department be the one saying, well, these are the electric vehicles, this is where this is going, or how did it get, how are you connected with it?
So this proposal also was part of the last budget, and DOA did administer, or was starting to administer those grants, and then I believe this also got tied up with the Supreme Court ruling. And so if it's functioning the way it was designed the last session, DOA really is managing it and leading it, and we're certainly a resource for them if we can be. And we like to connect the dots between our agencies, and so it's not something we wouldn't have an awareness of, or a pulse on. But if it's designed the way it was last session, last budget proposal, then you're looking at DOA as kind of the head of it.
And the governor's budget has the extra capital fund. I am pretty sure we're going to be supportive of that. We are supportive of that. How far does that go? So would a transit system, would this improve a transit system's ability to connect with other providers like paratransit, or how would you envision this going based on the fact that there is no longer a federal assistance in this area, where we used to get a great appropriation, $20–30 million in some cases over the years, where vehicles were purchased that were paratransit, elderly, disabled, etc. How do you see that going?
So yeah, good questions, Gary. So the funds would be available for, I use the term bus facilities, which is kind of borrowing from the feds a little bit, but it's to cover vehicle projects, facility projects, and equipment. We know the main need among
Right.
the transit systems is vehicle replacement. And so it would flow through each of the transit communities, at a municipal level first, based on, the needs that they identify. So if it's replacing, paratransit vehicle, and they put that, and they identify that need, that would be an eligible project. If it's a heavy duty bus for a bigger system, that would be an eligible project. So it would be coordinating with the communities on what they identify as their needs. And we know that 10 million is great. It sounds like a pretty big number, but we know that the annual needs exceed that significantly.
Right.
And there are some federal dollars that we utilize through the FTA bus and bus facilities program, but again, it's not enough. And so we know that there still be competition among these scarce resources and prioritization that has to happen.
It could also include a county transit system if the county operates the system, as opposed to a municipality,
Correct. Yeah. Municipal in the broad sense of the broad definition of like a local public body.
Right.
Yeah.
And the deal,
city, county. Yeah.
if we stepped back a few years before you had this title, the federal government would send money in, and the DOT would make grant allocation based on need. So, for example, if Wausau had the oldest buses, those buses would be replaced before other buses that maybe weren't quite as old in another system. So there was a way to get the best bang for the taxpayer's dollar out of this program. And I'm assuming those things like that will be worked out through policies and rules that could be adopted to say, so that it doesn't, go to the best written application. There's some need involved in it. You get my point
Yep.
Of how it used to work.
Yeah, we look at quantitative and qualitative factors in evaluating project. The quantitative would be, kind of what you're getting at, I think, which is, age of vehicle, mileage of vehicle. Qualitative, I use that term a little bit loosely, but it's like, okay, this bus has got a cracked frame, it's maybe lower mileage, but it's inoperable or less safe because it's got a cracked frame to it. So we look at those factors to assess need, and our aim is always to try to, support the greatest need first. Worst first is often sort of how it plays out, and it can be challenging because we know that there are old fleets out there across the state. So it's Eau Claire's old bus versus Sheboygan's old bus, or Platteville's old vehicle versus Clintonville's old vehicle, and it's hard, but that's what we try to do. And
as you and I have talked, and I have talked with both Diana and Ian about this, and one of the things on our agenda is to really see if we can analyze what is the status of the fleets in Wisconsin. Where are we at in terms of modernization, safety? Where are we at? If we do this in rail, obviously somebody made a decision that some new vehicles and new engines were needed after the others were built in 1940. And the same for this. And then we're seeing what is actually happening to the provider networks in the state, because these programs don't work without the connection of getting the recipient to their health care or to their job or to their educational skills training, et cetera. So I have been talking with a few legislators about finding a way to explore the needs in our state of the provider networks. Where have they gone, or what's their future? And with the availability of technical equipment, vehicles, connecting people to the internet, how is this all going to look in the future? So I just want you all, as we end this call, to be aware of that. And if there are things, the department has had a fund in the past that does research. I think that there are people that could respond to that question, but there's been no analysis that I'm aware of as to, Jim Brown mentioned, there used to be, when the SMV vehicles started, there were 300 plus providers. Well, now there are 90 or fewer. Is that good? Is that bad? How did that happen? Do we care? Does it matter? Or is it something we should be concerned about? And our policy standing in the way of this? And as it relates to vehicles, and thankfully your department was so helpful on COVID, and we're going to do that at 4:30. That is a big question facing us, and I speak for really all of us on the call, even passenger rail folks, is what are we going to do in that regard in the future? And this secretary, your current boss, really likes that kind of stuff and is particularly good at it. And it's a form of strategic planning that I think really needs to be looked at. And the pandemic has taken its toll as well. So thank you for writing it down.
Okay, my question basically to Ian is, with the new proposed COVID package coming in, is that money going to be available for transit capital in addition to operating costs, or especially the rural money, and how's that going to work?
So yeah, I was still speculating a little bit on what this next round of COVID relief, I'm calling it COVID 3, it CARES, and then CRISA, and now there's this next one. And I think, so what FTA has done in the past and what it looks like it'll be doing in the future is operating and capital expenses are eligible, but the focus is really on the operation side of things and trying to maintain service levels, trying to maintain staffing, those types of things. Now in the CARES program, we received about, I think it was about 55 million for the rural program. But then CRISA, the next round, we actually got $0 for the rural program. And this is because Congress built in these formulas that, it was much more complicated, but it was looking back at some historical national transit database information, looking at percentages of CARES money that was allocated there. And so we ended up, basically we ended up getting $0. And my understanding is that they're looking at increasing some of those formulas, so to give a higher threshold. But honestly, I don't know if we're going to get any money for rural. We didn't get any money for the small urbans either in CRISA. And so it's, there is a question about of if we get any, we have, before we can say how it'll be allocated, we got to get some first. So I mean, until the bill is signed, until we actually see apportionment tables from FTA, it's difficult to really say how it'll be utilized. But like I said, the feds have been really pushing on operations first, but then in some circumstances, capital projects, would be eligible. So we would, at the WisDOT level, we would apply those same policies, I would say.
Wendel Johnson had a quick question, if we've got a minute.
Sure.
Thanks a lot, Mark. I also want to say thanks to the WDOT people. I really learned an awful lot, and it sounds like they're keeping busy. I think these are potentially exciting times with the Biden budgets coming up, and I'd like to encourage Wisconsin to really think big about some of the plans, and particularly northeastern Wisconsin, which is sort of overlooked. And I should also add the Upper Peninsula of Michigan is a potential market also. There's some people at northern Michigan who have studied and written a book actually on waiting for the train, and it's very appealing if people can go a few hours and get it in northeastern Wisconsin. But one of the things that excites me is the idea of some sort of demonstration trains from Amtrak. And I'm hoping maybe that some of the people who deal with them on a regular basis might help plant that idea. I know years ago, there was a demonstration train that came even through Marinette, which at one time had passenger service. But people, once they see trains, once they get on them or experience a short demonstration ride them, it's really a good selling point. And I think we need to push that a little bit also. But again, thanks everybody for a really informative session.
Any final words, Diana, from you? Greetings from the secretary, some new appropriation we don't know about.
No surprises, but thank you again for the opportunity to see you guys virtually today. I know that we certainly appreciate these opportunities and the work that you guys have been doing through a pandemic. And you know, you're really on the front line there, and we certainly appreciate what you're doing and acknowledge that. And you know, we're happy to see the increases that we do in the governor's proposed budget, especially considering that we are coming kind of in a recovery state here. But the governor's really prioritizing our locals. And so we're happy to see that. Again, we're here as a resource. So we hope that